All right, so when we left off in chapter 4 of A Chocolate Touch, now not just food and drinks are turning into chocolate when John eats them, regular items are too. So John was chewing on his thumb, but he was wearing gloves, and the thumb of his glove broke right off in his mouth and turned straight into chocolate. Then a boy who likes to pick on him named Spider comes and is amazed that his glove is turning into chocolate, so he steals the glove from him and he puts the glove in his mouth and it doesn't turn to chocolate. So he's just eating another boy's glove now. So we're figuring out that this is only happening to John. Nobody else is to having chocolate things happen in their mouth, just John. And then we know our friend Susan, who likes to collect things, got a brand new coin for her collection on her birthday. And John didn't believe it was real. So she told him, go on, bite it. Because if you've ever seen like the Olympics or anything, to make sure that their medal is real, they bite on it. And it's kind of like a thing you do. And so he's like, I don't want to. And she was like, no, just do it. And he did it. And when he bit into it, the coin broke in half. And of course, the piece in his mouth turned into chocolate. And he gave her back half a coin. And she started crying and said that she never wants to talk to him ever again. She told him she hates him, so she's really mad. So this is chapter 5, and here's our picture. It looks like a math test. John hung up his coat, got his notebook and his pencil out of his locker, and sat down at a small table just in time for the second bell, when Mrs. Plimsoll walked silently into the classroom. As soon as she appeared in the doorway, all the chattering and scuffling stopped. The 20 boys and girls sat straight in their chairs and looked straight ahead at the clean blackboard. Good morning, children, Mrs. Plimsoll said. Good morning, Mrs. Plimsoll, the class answered respectfully. Mrs. Plimsoll sat at her desk, blinking her eyes as she surveyed the room. Then she opened a little drawer in her desk and pulled out a spectacles case, from which she took out her reading glasses. She removed her long-distance glasses and put on her short-distance glasses. She snapped shut the spectacles case and replaced it in the drawer. She shut the drawer, tilted her head forward so that she could look over the glasses on her nose, and said, This morning, children, we are going to have an important test. There were some groans and a few oohs and ahs. Mrs. Plimsoll lifted up one of her hands, and silence was restored instantly. No complaining, please, she said sternly. This test will show me how well you've been learning your math this year. It will be a short one. I'm just going to write 4 problems on the board. I shall expect you to solve them all swiftly and accurately, and you will write all of your answers neatly. You will place your paper in front of you now. You will write your name at the top right-hand corner, and then you will place your pencil beside your paper. Sit back in your chair and wait until I give the signal word to begin your work. Mrs. Plimsoll turned to the blackboard and began chalking up the test problems. Tests always made John nervous. Besides, his lips were feeling dry, and the taste of chocolate was strong in his mouth. He raised his hand. Yes, John? Mrs. Plimsoll asked. Please, may I go ahead and get a drink of water? Please, Mrs. Plimsoll? He asked in a small voice. Very well, hurry back. We're going to start in a few minutes. John gratefully slipped out of the room and walked quickly down the quiet corridor to a water fountain. His tongue felt thick with chocolate. The cold water would be very refreshing. He pressed his foot down on the frozen treadle, and a stream of clear, ice-cold water spurted out of the basin. He lowered his head until the jet of the water reached his lips. The cold water splashed delightfully against the outside of his mouth. He opened his lips, and as soon as the water gushed in, it turned into ice-cold chocolate water, thin and sweet. Quickly stopping the flow, John looked with dismay at the shallow puddle that had formed and was now draining in the basin of the fountain. He hurried to another fountain on the second floor of the building, but there the same thing happened. The clear, ice-cold water turned to liquid chocolate in his mouth. When John finally got back to his classroom, all the other pupils were bent over their tables, busily scratching away. Mrs. Plimsoll looked up from her book as John tiptoed in. She looked back at the clock on her wall and looked back at him, wagging her finger reprovingly. John began on the first of the 4 problems, but he was so worried about the chocolate water that he couldn't keep his mind on his work. By the time he was all ready to start the 4th problem, the other boys and girls were already putting down their pencils and straightening up and smiling at each other. So there's the classroom, and there's Mrs. Plimsoll. And there are the 4 problems on the board. 2 minutes to go, said Mrs. Plimsoll, concentrating hard. John took the end of his pencil between his teeth and began to nibble it. It immediately turned to chocolates. Then he noticed an even more disturbing change. Although he had taken the pencil out of his mouth as soon as the first piece of chocolate had crumbled off, the pencil was continuing to change into chocolate. The chocolate was slowly but steadily moving down the pencil, replacing the yellow wood and the lead inside, and changing into chocolate before John's eyes. The magic, for John now knew that this power must be magic, was apparently getting stronger and stronger. By the time the whole pencil had changed from red, yellow, and black to dark brown, Mrs. Plimsoll was announcing that there were only a few seconds left in which to write down the final answer. So there you can see his pencil turning into chocolate. Just a minute, John pleaded. Shh, Mrs. Plimsoll cautioned him, holding up a finger to her mouth. Shh, chorused the slow workers, who were becoming almost as anxious as John. But John felt the worst of all. He felt sure that he could finish the problem and write down the correct answer, if only he had something to write with. But Mrs. Plimsoll, he begged in a whisper, my pencil, it turned into chocolate. Hush, John, Mrs. Plimsoll said. I'll speak to you after the bell rings. John tried to write with his Chains pencil, but the point was too soft, and he only succeeded in making chocolate smear all over the page where he should have written number 72. All right, so now this chocolate is affecting John from doing his work. He's going to fail his math test because everything's turning into chocolate. So we will see what happens next.